Welcome to Never Again is Now, a podcast about anti Semitism. I am Evelyn Marcus.
And I am Phyllis Zimbler Miller.
The Trump administration is putting pressure on universities to better protect the safety and freedom of Jewish students. This isn't easy, as academic institutions also have to uphold free criticism on Israel. Our guest recently did a study about anti-Israel campus activism. We will discuss the results with him, and they are shocking. Günter Yekeli is a historian and sociologist. He is an associate professor at Indiana University Bloomington and the Institute for the Study of Contemporary Anti-Semitism. Günter, welcome. It's great to have you on our show.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. Thank you so much, Phyllis, for having me. Yes, I'm looking forward to the conversation and to, of course, to present some of the results from our study. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Günter, before we discuss the results, can you briefly tell us why you did the study and what type of data you have used in your research?
Sure. So I've been teaching here and at Indiana University for almost 10 years now, and it's been a quiet, more or less college town here. We have a large student body of 48,000 students, and about 10% of them are Jewish. And so we have very active Hillel and Chabad. But with October 7th, there have been, before that, there were some anti-Semitic incidents. I think starting that are really students came to me and talked about this in 21. But then after October 7th, this was really, a lot of anti-Semitic things happened that you could not overlook anymore. And even I remember that on the Monday after October 7th, we had a wonderful event here commemorating the people who were brutally murdered on October 7th. And there was an event in commemoration, and we were mourning for these people. And that was on the Monday afterwards. And it was still ongoing, and we did not all that had happened. So we had a nice event with about 1,000 people. And then there was a counter protest to that. I mean, how can you counter protest that? And there were pro-Palestinian groups who made a counter protest and then disturbed this event with like driving by with flags, Palestinian flags, and then shouting them things. So that was very disturbing. And then more and more of these incidents happened. And these pro-Palestinian groups, I spoke to some of their leaders again in the few days afterwards. There was a radio show, I was invited, and they kind of like at least privately condemned Hamas, but then increasingly not so. And I'm working in or I'm leading a social media research lab, and then I work with a lot of students in there, and they then said, well, have a look at these what some of these leaders in these pro-Palestinian groups or anti-Israel groups really, or pro-Hamas groups, and it turned out what they're saying. And then already at the end of 23, so in December, November, beginning of 24, there were statements literally, some people forwarding things, glory to Hamas.
Wow.
And I mean, that was just, I couldn't believe myself. That was publicly available. Nobody was bothered by that other than my students and I and some others. And I thought, where is this coming from? I mean, how can you be so brainwashed that you really cheer Hamas? I mean, this is just beyond me. So we started looking into ways to look at this phenomenon. What are these groups really? You might have seen you have also seen what we've seen in the news. A lot of these campus groups, there are chapters and have more or less the same names. So Students for Justice in Palestine, Bloomington, or and have them different chapters, or some other similar groups. So we were lucky. We have a cooperation with the Bright Data Initiative, and they gave us access to scraping all these group, their online activities. Most of them are active on Instagram. And there is a wonderful organization, AMCHA Initiative in California, and they have been collecting anti-Semitic incidents on campuses in the United States for a decade now. And they have also made a list of these anti-Israel groups on campus. So we took this list and added a bit more and saw that, yeah, most of them, 80%, use Instagram to disseminate their events, or I would say propaganda. So we looked at all these posts from 2015 until the end of 24. So there was a lot of data, 76,000 posts, the description and comments and so on. That we looked at this and tried to analyze it. And also what you can see there, who's working with whom. So you can map networks. So we had this data set from this 76,000 posts we looked at. We also had the data set from AMCHA of the anti-Semitic incidents on these different campuses, and then how many groups are per campus. And then we had these three data sets, and we looked at, okay, what's going on there, what are correlations, and so on.
Okay. Phyllis.
So how spontaneous or grassroots are the anti-Israel protests and walkouts on campus?
Yeah, they're not grassroots at all, we have to say. That it is not so this is a kind of modern structure. It's not a hierarchy in the classic sense that somebody tells all the students what they have to do. It doesn't work that way. But they are really networked, and you can see that who is collaborating with whom on the posts, because you can then like have up to 5 people collaborating with you on people or groups with you on a post, and then you can see, and you have to agree to it. So that is an active form of collaboration. And we see that the National Students for Justice in Palestine is most frequently people work with this group, and it's very central to this networks of anti-Israel groups. And the National Students for Justice in Palestine on October 8th, 23, they put out a very detailed toolkit, they called it, what to do, what kind of message to spread, with links to posters that you can just adapt and put the name of your group in there for like social media, but also for offline, just to print it out. And they had this very radical rhetoric ready on October 8th, and they disseminated this widely. So that was a toolkit they were celebrating these paragliders, for example, these kind of images that then you also saw on some of these campus groups. In Chicago, for example, they took this with the paraglider glorifying these Hamas fighters attacking Jews in Israel, right? So this very radical rhetoric, they are responsible for a big chunk of it. And then they partner with even more radical groups, the Palestinian Youth Movement, which has ties to terrorists. And this is an international organization that has a lot of, I think, 750,000 followers or so. And that you can see this collaboration with these outside groups. So these radical Palestinian groups, like Palestinian Youth Movement and some others, that have links to terrorists that are documented. And then also some from the far left. They have also collaborate with them, were influenced by them. Dissenters is one, and they have also bigger groups of followers. So that helped them to spread the message. And
So,
it's really not a grassroots. On the individual campuses, there were then people who built this page. A lot of these pages were only built then after October 7th, these Instagram pages, for example, or they're also active on Telegram and some other channels, but a lot is happening on Instagram. So, and then they were just taking these messages and spreading it further. So you had these activists that were responsible on different campuses, and then students who, for whatever reasons, then bought into that. And just, I think some of them were really brainwashed. I tried to talk to some of these students. It was really hard to talk to them. Can go into more details if you want, but yeah, you have this well organized, and then they were able to at least relatively small number, I'm saying, to the student body. As I said, we have 48,000 students here, and maybe active in this were like 300. You know, it's a very small percentage. But these 300 students, they can create a climate on campus that, like, everybody more or less thinks now that you cannot object to the idea that there is a genocide in Gaza now happening, which is a defamatory accusation against Israel, right? It's there are atrocities in Gaza. It's certainly not easy to live there, but Israel is not engaged in genocide. It's just simply not true. But there is now a climate also here on campus that, at least in many spaces, well, you cannot object to that. If you do so, you're excluded. And so a small minority, if they're very active, can achieve that. And that is a very dangerous thing. And so, yes, it's not at all grassroots. It's these incorporation. It's a bit like really not exactly top down, but it's in this pushing of these propaganda narratives. And you have this resistance, martyrs celebrated, this accusation of genocide. All that was there on the fringes before October 7th, but after October 7th, it got a lot more popularity, a lot more likes, a lot more engagement, a lot more posts like this. So yeah, that's the development.
so well, yes, what I find shocking to hear Gunther is that so this was already on October 8th. There was an organization having a toolkit ready
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
on
toolkit obviously was.
on various campuses in the United States to glorify Hamas, to glorify so-called martyrs that attacked civilians in Israel, and to condemn Israel on October 8th. It was as if they already knew that October 7th was happening. That's even more shocking to hear. And
Oh,
you found, I mean, I guess they didn't put together their toolkit within 24 hours. It must have been there. So that's very suspicious to me and shocking. And you also say that you indeed found online relationships and intensive ties with very radical terrorist organization, Palestinian organization, or affiliated and very radical outside of campus. So this whole, and then a small minority that is involved with this activism also kind of terrorizes the rest of campus, that if
Right.
they don't go along
Mhm.
with this radical rhetoric, they're ostracized or punished in some way.
Mhm.
Is my summary correct?
Yes, and the reason why this is possible, I mean, we have so first to this October 8th that they were ready with this toolkit. I get this question often. I mean, it's very well documented, and it's a document that you cannot create in 24 hours because it was also linked to folders where you could download all this stuff. So it was really well thought through, and you cannot do it in 24 hours. It's impossible. But I think they did not know that October 7th was happening, but they were preparing for some kind of event like this or some kind of conflict war between Hamas and Israel. I mean, it was for some years that went on and off. So they could foresee that there would be another eruption of violence. So I think they were prepared in that way and then launched it on October 7th. So an opportunity there.
Yeah.
And you can even see that on the numbers of anti-Semitic incidents that they went up right after October 7th and right before Israel really, the IDF really went with troops on the ground in Gaza. So before it really became much harsher for the Gazan population, right? So it was already in the week after October 7th. And this group, when they launched this toolkit, they called for a day of resistance on October 12th. I mean, it's just crazy. And then, this was then resistance. Hamas is resistance. So it's the rhetoric that they're using is even some of it is even more radical than the Hamas rhetoric in English. If you look at what Hamas published, for example, they published a booklet in early 24, Our Narrative. And so they kind of try to justify what they did. Denials also included, and so. And they try to cater for an English-speaking audience, right? So they have this anti-colonialist narratives in there. But some of these radical groups, campus groups, they top even the language that's in there, or they directly use some of the images that is in this Hamas booklet. So, for example, you might have seen this tank. There was a tank that on October 7th, some Palestinian terrorists, they conquered this tank and stand up on top of the tank with waving a Palestinian flag. So they put this on the front page of their booklet, Hamas. And the same thing was just a month ago was used by a student organization doing a workshop, The Right to Resist, Al-Aqsa Flood and Armed Resistance, and having that as a teach-in workshop using the same image from the Hamas booklet. I mean, it's just unbelievable that they just take the same thing from Hamas, the language, the imagery, everything.
So can we conclude?
Okay, so this
Yeah.
is
Sorry.
one thing. But why is it possible that they get away with that and that they can disseminate all this? I mean, it was there on the fringes before, but nobody was really listening. A few people were listening. So I think there's two factors. One is that the administration, they just did not do their job and at least condemn this kind of things that's going on their campuses. I mean, directly pro-terrorist statements. You should, even if you don't want to exclude the students or ban them, but you should at least put out a statement that saying, well, we don't agree with that. This does not reflect our values. So somewhat, hopefully in a stronger language than that. But so that's one thing. And I think what's even a bigger factor is that a lot of the professors have been teaching for years this kind of rhetoric of anti-colonialism, resistance by all means, and this kind of rhetoric that they can really then adapt easily and put in slogans. So they had the theories out there, and that's why I think it had the backing of some of the professors at least. And so, yeah, it could spread easily.
So we are seeing influence from outside, organized, planted on campus, and people in place on campus to pick that material up and push it further out on campus on let's call them innocent students. You mentioned Palestinian groups. Have you seen any other influence on campus from outside than from Palestinian radical groups, maybe even Hamas?
Well, Hamas, they they don't actively like go into this cooperation with these student groups, but we see like in the comments, we saw some comments from Iranian influence, Iranian agents that you can see. One was praising the students, and that was even on our campus. So there was an Iranian account praising the students, saying, yes, you're doing a great job in the resistance, and I encourage you to read Khomeini's letter to the youth of Europe. So he's openly praising the Iranian regime's propaganda, and nobody was objecting to that, in the comments.
What
So
about funding?
yeah,
All those encampments with the identical tents, where are they getting the money?
yeah, you don't need too much money. So open an Instagram account is free. Getting some like posters is also not very expensive. Um, Tents is a bit more expensive if you want to do encampments, but it's also not. I mean, we're in Indiana, and everybody goes out camping uh, on the weekends. So I think I guess they have some tents. So yeah, but there is funding I mean, that people have been trying to look into where the funding is coming from. So the National Students for Justice in Palestine organization, that's an organization that has been around for 3 decades. So I doubt that all of them who are now active are still students. I don't know. And also where the funding is coming from, that somebody, I mean, the work that I put into these is probably they're paying some people as well. But I don't know. It's not huge funding that you need for this kind of organization type structure, right? But there is to keep this going, yes, you need some. And it's not clear, at least to me, where exactly this funding is coming from. But we have seen, well, the influence of foreign funding for universities sponsoring some programs and from Qatar, and so some have done like studies. ISGAP has done one, and I think my colleague and friend Joe Finkelstein as well from the Contagion Network. They have looked into this funding, where that might be coming from. But it's not easy really, because of course they don't want to make it transparent where the funding is coming from.
Can we conclude, Gunther, from your study that Hamas and even Iran and other terrorist groups, together with extreme left groups, actively drive students and faculty towards anti-Semitism and radicalization on American campuses?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's not really a top-down thing. So Hamas puts out their statements and rhetoric, and then there are these other groups who are happy to use that and take it. But Hamas doesn't tell them you have to do that. That's not how that works. But they're happy to work within these structures, and then you can see who is recommending whom and who is like forwarding what, and then you can see this kind of network that is then there.
Right, but if you look at who founded Students for Justice in Palestine, that's a Hamas affiliated activist.
Yeah, but I don't know enough about the funding really. I cannot really talk to that. But
No, not funding, but who founded it? Who founded
the
it?
founder, yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, yes. I didn't understand. Yes, and the Palestinian Youth Movement is the most important collaborator from the National Justice and the Students for Justice in Palestine, the national organization. Their most important collaborator is the Palestinian Youth Movement.
Yes.
Which has then itself links to or promotes at least terrorist every now and then.
There we go.
Yeah. And then we have groups from the left. So Dissenters is one strong group that is very active in New York, but also in other places. And some other left-wing groups that have the same rhetoric, almost same rhetoric, but with this anti-colonialist, this
Okay.
anti-Western, frankly, rhetoric and glorifying resistance, saying we need to resist the imperium of the imperialists by all means. And so this is justification of really extreme violence in the rhetoric. And so what we have been observing now, the rhetoric has been relatively quickly escalated to violent rhetoric. We have seen some incidents, but most of the incidents so far on campuses have not been like physical incidents. I mean, against person, graffiti, a lot of graffiti, and threats, but not a lot of, there were some, but not so many physical incidents. But I see with now the administrations are, I mean, in general, the American administration, Trump administration, try to like have some impact, but it's very difficult to do this from a national level. So I think it has to be like on the campuses by campus. And so the administrations with this outside pressure, not only from the Trump administration, but also from donors and from like, I think the American people, and I think the same goes for Canada and hopefully also for in European places where the situation is not much different. That they don't want this kind of rhetoric. They don't agree with that. It's still minority. So in the administrations, our administration, they try now to like limit at least the visibility of these groups. What can then happen, and that's not new in this kind of radical groups, that they radicalize further and say, well, now it's not enough to protest, we have to take action. And this is what you saw recently in Washington, D.C., in front of the Jewish Museum, two people murdered by somebody who had exactly the same rhetoric, who said, well, this is not going anywhere, I need to take action. And also in Boulder, Colorado, the same rhetoric, and then putting a group of Jews on fire, right? So, and then shouting "Free Palestine." So it is with this kind of argumentation. So that I think this is a dangerous phase. I hope that nothing like this happens on any campus, but a dangerous phase where some of these students who have been indoctrinated for now 2 years, almost 2 years, that they have, and if you really believe that Israel is really committing genocide and all these people who stand by Israel, all kind of, they are also then responsible somehow. If you believe that, and you have this urgency, what a lot of people say, we need to do something, and say, with all this rhetoric, yes, we have, all means are justified. Well, I mean, this is a very small step really to like become violent, not only in rhetoric, but in action. So I think it's a dangerous phase now. We'll see. Hopefully it all goes well, but we have to see how that plays out now.
What can we do as listeners?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, this only works, this crazy climate on campus. It's that it's hard to object even to that kind of rhetoric. And if you object, then you kind of exclude it. This only works, or including that now Zionist or Zionism has become kind of an insult, right? But this only works if people agree to that. If I stand up and say, look, I'm a Zionist, I think that Israel should exist. It's good that Israel exists. I mean, then it doesn't work anymore. So we need more people to object to this rhetoric or say, hang on, with this genocide. What actually are you talking about? And what is, to have these objections, and this should come, of course, should come from the administration. They
You mean the
should,
college administration, right?
yes, I mean the university administration. Whatever the entity is where this is happening, they should make sure that, I mean, this is a cult-like thinking that is also, I mean, just in principle, very bad for a university. I mean, this is just the opposite of cult-like thinking. So it's even in the interest, I think, of the university. It just, I mean, regardless if it's anti-Semitic or so, this is not a good development for a university. And if you get indoctrinated, and then it's just a useless place, I think, to study.
Do
And
do you
and
see do you
yeah.
see any steps by university administrations in spite of their being funded, the funding coming from Qatar and so on? Do you see any steps recently of breaking through this, stopping this cult thinking and oppression by a minority of the majority of students on their point of view of Israel?
Yeah, small steps. So in our administration, for example, we recently got, like last week, a lot of people. We have a network here of professors and staff instructors who said we don't tolerate this anti-Israel rhetoric, and we built in the weeks after October 7th, we built a staff and faculty for Israel group that has about 70 or so people in there, and so we kind of meet regularly. We have a newsletter and so on. And in the last week, a lot of people said, "Oh, I received threatening emails, death threats, to my university account." And so we reported this to the administration, and they're trying to they cannot do much about it, but they're taking this serious now, I think. They talked with police about it, and they thinking about what they can do to have a structure. And so these are, I see, like, yeah, like it's taken more seriously than before, these kind of things. Also, when I complained that one of these, we have in our college here, we have a DEI program, and I participated in that for some years, saying, well, we should also talk about anti-Semitism, and they invited me. But after October 7th, they have put out a program, Israel-Palestine Conversations or something, and they invited only anti-Israel haters to speak. And at some point, I complained to the dean and said, look, this is one-sided. It's okay. I mean, have at least a debate. And this is excluding all the people who went there and who do not share with it. Some of them sent me then emails and told me what happened and said, well, I feel like I will never go again there because this is this is not inclusion, this is exclusion. And then the dean kind of, yeah, listened to me. That's also a good sign. And we had a conversation, didn't go anywhere because the one who was responsible for that said, well, next semester, so this fall semester, this series has finished and we will have another topic then, probably. So, but at least, I mean, there are small steps, I think, that I can see some signs that are taking this more seriously. It's also, I mean, it's bad for the image of the university. I mean, if I were a student and I had to choose to which university I want to go, I don't want to go to a university, I mean, Jewish or not Jewish, where I'm indoctrinated. I want to learn things. I want to think freely. And I don't want any like indoctrination. Like, I mean, if I want that, I can just go to like some social media places and get indoctrinated if I want that. This is not what I would expect for a university. So I think slowly, some of them are understanding this. With the professors, it's different. So the professors, they have most of them have then their tenured position, and they just go on with that. They double down on it. I mean, and if you are really embedded with this worldview that Israel is always the bad guy and Palestinians are always the good guys, whatever happens, then October 7th really doesn't fit into your worldview, right? And all the hostages, it just doesn't fit. Either you have two options. Either you say, okay, I was wrong. This was not a good thing. At least there's some responsibility from these Palestinian groups, even if that's not representative or so, but this is not. And then you have to say, okay, I have to rethink. Israel is not always 100% wrong, and Palestine not always 100% right. Okay, so very few people are ready to rethink their worldview. So what they do is, if they see posters, they rip them off because it doesn't fit. And I have students have one told me that, well, she got one of my colleagues on camera, is professor, who went and rip off like these posters of hostages. I mean, how crazy is that? You know, that there are like children on these posters and you feel the need to rip them off. Yeah. Yeah, but that's the reason. It doesn't fit, so it needs to be wiped off. I need to
Now
deny all the atrocities. Yeah.
it becomes almost an emotional process, not a rational one anymore.
Yeah,
And isn't that
100%
called
no.
cognitive dissonance when you have to keep your worldview intact
Yeah,
no
Mhm.
matter what?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this has been a fascinating conversation, really. And I thank you so much for coming on our show. I thank our listeners for listening to your update on what's going on. For those of you who want to know more about Evelyn and myself, please go to Never Again Is Now on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And as we end every podcast, we say, please speak up against anti Semitism and all hate.
Thank you so much.